Hey everyone, we are about to tackle a massive story, the entire history of the United States. We're going to trace the journey all the way from its very first people, right up to its role as a global power today. So let's just dive right in.
So the big question that's going to guide us through this whole explainer is this. How did a small group of just 13 colonies, kind of tucked away on the edge of a continent, turn into one of the most powerful and influential nations in the world? That's the puzzle we're here to piece together.
All right, let's start at the very beginning. I mean, way back. Our story kicks off long before the United States was even a thought, with the land's original inhabitants, and then, of course, the arrival of Europeans.
Now this timeline really puts things in perspective, doesn't it? For something like 15,000 years, this land was home to all these incredibly diverse Native American cultures. Then, 1492 happens. Christopher Columbus arrives, and that just kicks off a whole new era of European colonization. A couple of key moments to remember are 1607, when Jamestown was founded, and 1620, when the Pilgrims landed. These were the first permanent English footholds.
So, fast forward to the 1700s, and you've got these 13 colonies that have developed into three really distinct regions. You had New England up north with its small farms and fishing, then the middle colonies, which were super diverse and known as the breadbasket because they grew so much grain, and then you had the South, where the entire economy was built on huge plantations, a system that was completely dependent on the brutal institution of slavery. This division is going to be super important later on.
Okay, next chapter, forging a free nation. You know, living thousands of miles away from their rulers in Great Britain, the colonists started to develop their own unique identity. And, well, with that new identity came this really powerful desire to be in charge of their own destiny.
The whole conflict can really be boiled down to this one very famous phrase. Britain started hitting the colonies with new taxes, but the colonists had zero say in the matter. They had no one in the British government to speak for them. And to them, that was just fundamentally unfair. Why should they pay taxes if they didn't have a voice?
So how does that anger turn into a brand new country? Well, first came the protests, right? You've probably heard of the Boston Tea Party. But things kept escalating, and it exploded into a full-blown war in 1775. Just a year later, colonial leaders signed the Declaration of Independence, which was this incredibly bold statement saying, hey, we're our own country now. And after years of fighting, in 1783, Britain finally agreed.
So, you've won the war, now what? The new country needed a rule book, and that rule book was the U.S. Constitution. This was a really groundbreaking document that laid out the plans for a government built on these new ideas of freedom and democracy, with George Washington stepping in as the very first president.
But the story was far from a simple happily ever after. As this young nation started to grow, and I mean grow at an incredible rate, a deep and frankly terrible division was growing right along with it. A division that was all about one issue, slavery. I mean, check this out. In 1803, the United States literally doubled in size overnight with the Louisiana Purchase. This just poured fuel on the fire of manifest destiny, this belief that America was destined to stretch from coast to coast. But with every new piece of land came that same toxic question: would it be a free state or a slave state?
And as the country got bigger, that conflict just got worse. The North was building factories, and on a moral level, more and more people believed slavery was just plain wrong. Meanwhile, the South's entire agricultural economy was built on the backs of enslaved people. You basically had two different countries growing inside one.
But even in all this darkness, there was just incredible bravery. The Underground Railroad, it wasn't a real railroad with tracks and trains. It was a secret network of incredibly courageous people, both black and white, led by heroes like Harriet Tubman. They risked everything to create a path to freedom. It was a powerful, stunning act of resistance.
Eventually, this deep division just couldn't hold, and it exploded into the Civil War. It was a brutal, bloody conflict. Led by President Abraham Lincoln, the North fought to hold the country together and, with the Emancipation Proclamation, to finally end slavery. The North won, the country was reunited, and slavery was abolished. But the long, hard fight for true equality, that had only just begun.
So what happens next? Well, in the decades after the Civil War, America goes through another massive transformation. This is when industry, immigration, and a couple world wars would forge the nation into the global power we know today.
It was the Industrial Revolution, and it changed everything. Factories completely transformed how people worked and lived.
Millions of immigrants poured in from all over the world chasing that American dream. You had mind-blowing inventions like electricity and the telephone, and railroads were crisscrossing the country, stitching it all together.
All this growing industrial and military strength meant America couldn't just stay on its own side of the ocean anymore. It started getting involved in global conflicts, like the Spanish-American War, then World War I, and especially World War II. That last one really cemented its status as a global superpower.
And that brings us into the modern era we're more familiar with. After World War II, America found itself in a totally new kind of global conflict, all while facing some really profound challenges to its own ideals right here at home.
This was the Cold War. Now, it wasn't a hot war with direct fighting between the US and the Soviet Union. It was more of a global chess match, a rivalry of ideas and influence. It was democracy and capitalism versus communism. And this competition played out in all sorts of ways, most famously in the space race to see who could land a man on the moon first.
At the exact same time, a huge struggle for justice was happening inside America's own borders. The civil rights movement fought to tear down racial segregation. It was defined by these incredibly pivotal moments, like the Supreme Court finally ending school segregation, Rosa Parks' simple, brave act of defiance on a bus, Martin Luther King Jr.'s powerful "I Have a Dream" speech, all of which led to huge legal changes like the Civil Rights Act.
So after all that, where does America stand today? Well, you can see its global influence pretty much everywhere. In its economy, you've got giant tech companies like Apple and Google. In its military, one of the most powerful and advanced in the world. And in its culture, from Hollywood movies to pop music, it's exported all over the globe.
You know, when you take a step back and look at the whole thing, the story of America is one of incredible contrasts. It's full of amazing progress and really painful struggles. It's a story about resilience, it's shaped by people from every corner of the world, and it's defined by this constant and often very difficult journey to actually live up to its own founding ideas of liberty and equality for all.
And that story is absolutely still being written. The journey from those 13 little colonies to a global superpower was packed with triumphs and challenges. So the question for all of us now is, what's the next chapter going to look like? Thanks for watching.